It is once again that time of the week where I come on the air and call out the establishment on its CRAP. It's that weekly news program where we dig under the establishment propaganda into some truth nuggets that are buried right there underneath the dirt. We talk about politics, we talk about political strategy, we talk about the current events, both here in Kalamazoo and around the world. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And begin the show by saying, as I do with every program, following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR, Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may be. So, I wanted to hop in with, and granted, this story is a couple days old at this point, but it happened after last week's episode, and it was really big in the news for a couple days, which is actually kind of a good thing. I am speaking, of course, about the Trump administration pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. Oh dear. So for those of you who don't know, Paris Climate Accord is a international agreement to set a particular target of keeping warming below 2 degrees. And the whole thing is like, it's not a treaty, it's an accord. No country has to is forced to abide by it. In fact, the countries who participate basically sent their own benchmarks, and even then, there's no like legal obligation for them to follow it. So, not really the strongest agreement to begin with. I've been very critical of the Paris Climate Agreement in the past. As a matter of fact, when I was kind of swept into a climate change-induced malaise a couple years ago, I saw this pop on my radar on the Paris Climate Agreement, and it really just wasn't enough. At best, it offered a controlled descent into the end of civilization, and particularly with how flexible the agreement was and how participation was basically just, kind of like, meh, please try to stop pumping CO2 in the atmosphere. It really wasn't a pause for a lot of hope. I think for a lot of outside observers, it was good PR. It was something that the layman could look at and say, oh, they're working on the problem. How fantastic. But if you just start scratching a little bit beneath the surface, it's a bum deal. It's like a movie set. Like if you guys have ever seen Blazing Saddles and they make the fake town and they all come running in, the bad guys come running in to take over the town. They realize it's all cardboard cutouts and sets. Yeah, that's to me how like the Paris Climate Agreement was. That was like the kind of environmental equivalent of a fake set to trick the people of the world into thinking that, hey, your beloved and benevolent governments are taking this issue seriously and they're doing something about it. So when you see hurricanes and firestorms and your particular coastal city sinking into the ocean, just think everything's fine. The people in charge are definitely taking care of it. No. Get to see my kind of anarcho-socialist leanings come out there. Government. All right, anyway. So, yeah, I definitely want to spend some time talking about this, and there was a very good article about it in The Intercept from Naomi Klein, who, for those who don't know, she's a great, brilliant activist and author of the book Capitalism versus Climate. This changes everything. Which actually I have not gotten around to reading yet, but I have heard is fantastic. She raises a lot of really good points that I've been talking to people over the past week, but she does it a little bit more eloquently than me, and with a little bit more expertise. So I thought I'd read some bits and pieces from this article here. This was published by The Intercept on June 1st. And the headline is, "Will Trump's slow-mo walk away, world in flames behind him, finally provoke consequences for planetary arson?" So yeah, that's a pretty intense headline right there. So I think you can kind of tell where she stands on the issue. So she goes on to say, "Now that it seems virtually certain that Donald Trump will withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, and the climate movement is quite rightly mobilizing in the face of this latest dystopian lurch, it's time to get real about something. Pretty much everything that is weak, disappointing, and inadequate about that deal is the result of U.S. lobbying since 2009. Keep in mind, a lot of y'all out there, you miss Obama, but his administration, they were excellent at telling people we take climate seriously. Now let's go support fracking all over the world, or we support, these climate targets. Let's give subsidies to the oil industry. So a lot of stuff the Obama administration was doing kind of outside of the public eye was kind of antithetical to what they were saying in public about where they stood on climate. Better than what we have now. Yeah, but anytime you compare anything to a dumpster fire and it'll look better by comparison. And keep that's a danger too, everybody. There's elections coming up, and don't be. I've been seeing a lot of these memes going around where people are like, just you got to settle. You got to settle for the lesser evil. You got to settle for the lesser evil is why we are in this existential doomsday crisis, because we're all like, let's go over the person who pollutes less. Let's go over the person who understands the science, but is going to invest in fossil fuels anyway. Let's vote for that person, because the other person is just so darn bad. Yeah, okay. You know what? Here's my litmus test for the next election, particularly 2020. Have a plan to drastically set out a World War II scale effort against climate change, like for real. Don't just give me lip service. Have an actual plan. Or I'm not voting for you. Sorry. No, Trump is terrible, but in the end, we need elected officials who are going to push against our barreling down the tracks towards human extinction. We need to get people in office who stand for that and understand the stakes. Otherwise, you might as well have some carnival clown in there. Yeah, he thinks climate change was made up by unicorns or whatever, but as we'll talk about later in this article, maybe that has an unintended effect. Okay, so we got a little sidetrack there, but let's continue on reading from this article. So, the fact that the agreement only commits governments to keeping warming below an increase of 2 degrees, rather than a much safer firm target of 1.5 degrees, was lobbied for and won by the United States. The fact that the agreement left it to individual nations to determine how much they were willing to do to reach that temperature target, allowing them to come to Paris with commitments that collectively put us on a disastrous course toward more than 3 degrees of warming, was lobbied for and won by the United States. So let's let's talk about what 6 degrees actually looks like. 3 degrees. So, and by the way, this is from a really important book called 6 Degrees, which kind of lays out what the world would look like under these conditions. So, oh, sorry about that. Having to take a sec, load it up. Okay. So, at 3 degrees, what we'd be looking at, basically, failing crop yields, particularly, in the Rust Belt. We'd be looking at decreases in the availability of water, massive droughts, rising, exponential rise in extinction of species, forest fires raging out of control, and kind of locked in to dangerous feedbacks in the climate system that will essentially just keep perpetuating. So, that is the danger at 3 degrees. And 3 degrees, that's what most sociologists and scientists agree is like, that's just more than civilization could really take to maintain itself. The burden to our population and the inevitability of more locked-in warming would really be like a perhaps not all-out extinction, but certainly the collapse of modern civilization and a much, much more difficult upward trek than is typical. What people should realize, civilizations collapse pretty regularly throughout human history. It's a fairly common event, much more common than one would think. But never before has a civilization collapse been combined with a drastic and extremely fast, on a human time scale, change or alteration in the way that our ecosystem works. There's no telling how the human species would be able to come back from that. It would certainly create a devastating population bottleneck, at the very least. So, going back to the article, it says the fact that the agreement treats even these inadequate commitments as non-binding, which means governments apparently do not have anything to fear if they ignore the commitments, is something else that was lobbied for and won by the United States. The fact that the agreement specifically prohibits poor countries from seeking damages for the cost of climate disasters was lobbied for and won by the United States. Particularly, some of the poorest countries on the planet are like island nations or live near the coast, and those people are the first to be affected by climate, and they're certainly not getting any help from nations like the United States and China and Saudi Arabia and Russia, and other big CO2 emitting countries. The fact that this is an agreement or an accord and not a treaty, the very thing that makes it possible for Trump to stage his action movie slow-mo walk-away world in flames behind him, was lobbied for and won by the United States. I could go on and on. Often the U.S. had help in this backroom bullying from such illustrious petrostates as Saudi Arabia. When aggressively lobbying to weaken the Paris Accord, U.S. negotiators usually argued that anything stronger would be blocked by the Republican-controlled House and Senate. And that was probably true. But some of the weakening, particularly those measures focused on equity between rich and poor nations, was pursued mainly out of habit, because looking after U.S. corporate interests is what the United States does in international negotiations. Whatever the reasons, the end result was an agreement that has a decent temperature target and an excruciatingly weak and half-baked plan for reaching it, which is why, when it was first unveiled, James Hansen, arguably the most respected climate scientist in the world, called the agreement a fraud, really, a fake, because there is no action, just promises. Lip service, ladies and gentlemen. But weak is not the same as useless. The power of the Paris Agreement was always in what social movements resolved to do with it. Having a clear commitment to keep warming below 2 degrees Celsius while pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees means there is no room left in the global carbon budget to develop fossil fuel reserves. That simple fact, even without legal enforcement behind it, has been a potent tool in the hands of movements against new oil pipelines, fracking fields, and coal mines, as well in the hands of some very brave young people taking the U.S. government to court for failing to protect their right to a safe future. And in many countries, including the U.S. until quite recently, the fact that governments at least paid lip service to the temperature target left them vulnerable to that kind of moral and popular pressure. As author and 350.org co-founder Bill McKibben said on the day that the Paris deal was unveiled, world leaders set a 1.5 degree Celsius goal, and we're damn well going to hold them to it. In many countries, that strategy continues regardless of Trump. A few weeks ago, for instance, a delegation from low-lying Pacific Island nations traveled to the Alberta tar sands to demand that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stop expanding production of that carbon-intensive fuel source, arguing that his failure to do so violates the spirit of his fine words and pledges he had made in Paris. And, Trudeau is a good example because those of you who don't know much about him, he was kind of fawned after by the progressive left when he became prime minister, I believe it was last year. And since then, though, he has stood on the side of oil companies when they've wanted to develop pipelines in indigenous land. He's stuck to a far more corporate stance. A lot of Canadian activists I know refer to him as like Canada's Obama. And in the sense that, her name escapes me. Well, there was a famous actress who divested from one of the big banks because of DAPL, and she called Justin Trudeau another handsome neoliberal. And unfortunately, that's kind of the path he's followed. Although, as we've seen in response to Trump, even a lot of those centrist leaders are taking climate very seriously. And, there was a strong concern that if the United States pulled out of the Paris Agreement, other countries would follow. That so far has not happened yet. Saudi Arabia and Russia are probably two countries that are most likely to follow suit with the United States. They've remained relatively silent. But most of the other countries in the agreement have come at solidarity and have said they're staying in the agreement. Not only that, they're going to work to make it stronger. Macron, who again is kind of a centrist, he made a speech in English about how they're going to work on this. They're going to make it stronger. They're going to make it something more tangible. He said he left with a kind of a dig at Donald Trump. It's like, we are going to make the planet great again. Ha ha. Well, he didn't actually say ha ha, but let's be clear too. This could be a net benefit for the Paris Agreement itself. So we had Rex Tillerson. And there's some division inside Trump's administration about whether to stay in or leave. Rex Tillerson, who is, former CEO of ExxonMobil, wanted to stay in the agreement. Now, is that because Tillerson thinks climate change is a problem? No, Exxon concealed climate data for 40 years from the American public. They knew what was going on, and they kept building fossil fuel infrastructure anyway. And as Naomi Klein says in the article, but Exxon could offer those assurances to its investors and claim it supported the agreement because it knew that the Paris Accord had no binding force. So in this sense, I really feel like the Trump administration is like basically cutting their nose to spite their face, because they could have easily stayed in the agreement, seemed more pragmatic, and basically done nothing, or at least not done as much as they said they were going to do, kind of like the Obama administration. And it would have at least it would have kept people asleep on the issue. It wouldn't have galvanized people to the extent that it is now, where now we're seeing cities and states across the country saying, we are, including Pittsburgh, which is kind of ironic, saying we are going to sign on with the agreement. We are going to stand for it. We're going to stand for making sure that we do the work where we live to prevent a climate catastrophe. And Kalamazoo is one of those cities. I'll actually be reading an article about that in a moment. So, that was that. The people in the Trump administration who wanted to stay in did so because they understood how legally weak the Paris climate deal was. So Naomi speaks to that. She says, just as Trump's healthcare disaster is encouraging states to consider single-payer more seriously than they have in decades, Trump's climate arson is so far only fueling climate ambition in states like California and New York. Rather than throwing in the towel, coalitions like New York Renews, which is pushing hard for the state to transition entirely to renewable energy by 2050, are getting stronger and bolder by the day. Outside the U.S., the signs aren't bad either. The transition to the renewable energy is already proceeding so rapidly in Germany and China, and prices are dropping so sharply that forces far larger than Trump are propelling the shift now. Oh, and here we're going to talk a little bit more about the economic side of it. Of course, it's still possible that Trump's withdrawal will provoke global backsliding, but it's also possible that the opposite will happen. That other countries, under pressure from their populations who are enraged by Trump's actions at pretty much every level, will become more ambitious if the U.S. officially goes rogue. And speaking of rogue, the Prime Minister from Ireland actually called us a rogue state. And there have been discussions for economic sanctions in the face of Trump's climate vandalism. She goes on to say, because here's a crazy idea. Whether or not it's written into the Paris Agreement, when you unilaterally decide to burn the world, there should be a price to pay. And that should be true whether you're the United States government or ExxonMobil, or some Frankenstein merger of the two. A year ago, the suggestion that the U.S. should face tangible punishment for putting the rest of the humanity at risk was laughed off in establishment circles. Surely no one would put their trade relationships in danger for anything so frivolous as a livable planet. But just this week, Martin Wolf, writing in the Financial Times, declared, if the U.S. withdrew from the Paris Accord, the rest of the world must consider sanctions. We're likely a long way from major U.S. trading partners taking that kind of a step, but governments are not the only ones that can impose economic penalties for lethal and immoral behavior. Movements can do so directly in the form of boycotts and divestment campaigns targeting governments and corporations on the South African model. And not just fossil fuel corporations, but Trump's branded empire as well. Moral suasion doesn't work on Trump. Economic pressure just might. And this is something, as a side note, I've been talking about ever since Trump got into office. One of my biggest critiques about the resistance to Trump so far is that the response to everything is a protest. It's, let's carry some signs, let's go make some noise. That can work when you have an activist or even like a center-right Democrat administration like Hillary Clinton's. Of course, well, okay, I will get into that in just a sec. But the kernel of what I'm trying to talk about here is that when you are facing an administration, a government that loathes you, that thinks you're ridiculous, You have to hit it where it hurts, where they understand, in their pockets. And, to speak about something, kind of near and dear to me, why do I think, and I do think this, I think the United States pulling out of the Paris Agreement might be a net benefit. And in a weird way, I need to thank Donald Trump for being dumb enough, well, Donald Trump and his little Nazi goon, Steve Bannon, for deciding to pull out of the agreement, because it has galvanized the rest of the world. It has galvanized cities across the country to step up and take action. And I've always said it is not going to be hoping that somebody like Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or people in our government were going to save us from this climate disaster was always a faulty premise. You had, back in the campaign, this was a woman who, on one side of her mouth, was talking about promoting fracking, and then the other was talking about, we're going to have a green transition. That kind of incremental language is not conducive to solving this extremely imminent existential threat. But when you put a face, an ugly, ugly face on that threat, like Donald Trump's, that wakes people up. That gets people out in the streets who might not otherwise be there. I think about this often. If Hillary Clinton was president right now, she wouldn't be dropping out the Paris Agreement. There'd still be fracking going on. And while people like Bill McKibben said, push her to the left, I do wonder with whom, because in the lead up to the election, the progressive and activist wing of not only the party but just politics was scorned deliberately and repeatedly by the Democratic establishment. And they still are to this day. But with Donald Trump pulling out of that agreement, you have not only those fiery environmentalist activists, those progressive Bernie-crat leftists up in arms, you got all the pink hat people too. You got all of the armchair activists out of their seats and into the streets. And the hopeful side of me, the one who thought we were all doomed a couple years ago, that there was no hope, that climate was just going to make us go extinct and I should make the best of the time that we had left. Well, now I see people resisting. I see people standing up. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe we do have a shot at this. Thanks for waking everybody up, Drumpf. All right, we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we get back, we're going to talk about this issue a little bit more, kind of scale it back to the local level, what Kalamazoo is doing to deal with climate change. Keep your dial locked. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
WIDR FM is supported in part by local Kalamazoo and Greater West Michigan businesses like yours. If you are interested in getting your business's name on the air while supporting Radio Evolution, please visit widerfm.org for underwriting packages and other support options.
Be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Gonna have a quick musical interlude. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for that news that cuts through the establishment's BS. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're talking about Trump pulling out of the Paris Accord, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Kalamazoo. This is from an article on MLive. It's called, headline is, After Trump Pulls Out of Paris Pact, Kalamazoo Vows Climate Action. It's written by Malachi Barrett, and it was published earlier today at about 7:45 in the morning. All right. So, though the United States will no longer participate in the Paris Climate Accord, Kalamazoo has joined other cities across the country committed to achieving the goals of the agreement. Mayor Bobby Hopewell is one of hundreds of American mayors who signed a pledge to adopt and uphold the Paris Climate Agreement goals in an open letter from the mayor's National Climate Action Agenda. Though Hopewell could not attend Monday's City Commission meeting, Commissioner Shannon Sykes reaffirmed Kalamazoo's commitment to addressing climate change. Last week, we saw a decision at the federal level in regards to Paris Climate Agreement that I know that Mayor Hopewell, as a number of commissioners, have received communication from folks who wants to move forward and do something locally in regards to the decision, Sykes said. This is something that we as a city are already committed to, and that won't change. As part of the Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 Master Plan and Strategic Vision Update, the city is also considering a climate action plan to reduce its carbon footprint. Kalamazoo won't have to reinvent the wheel. According to the Michigan Climate Action Network, there are at least 11 cities and counties in Michigan with climate action plans and mountains of research that could be applied to Kalamazoo. By the way, for those of you just out of curiosity, Representative Fred Upton said that pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord is a mistake. So I'm guessing he's probably from the Rex Tillerson school of thought, where it's like, you gotta pretend that we actually care. So, going on. While Director of the Department of Community Planning and Development, Rebecca Kick, engaged Kalamazoo residents to gather feedback for the city's new master plan, she recognized groups and individuals were concerned with the city's environmental impact. She asked Western Michigan University graduate students in a capstone seminar for the Master of International Development Administration program to determine actions the city could take to minimize its contribution to climate change. Final product is a 66-page document meant to serve as a guide for city administrators as they move forward in the planning process. It has not been passed by the city of Kalamazoo, but will likely be part of the master plan. Students were directed by Paul Clements, political science professor, a Democratic challenger to Fred Upton in the last election. Upton has since said, it was a mistake. During a presentation on the proposal in April, Kick said she has faith that it can be implemented. However, the actions proposed by the WMU students are not enough to reduce emissions to the level proposed in the 2016 Paris Agreement. The agreement seeks to reduce each participant's emissions 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2025 and around 90% below 2005 levels by 2050. Following the students' recommendations could reduce emissions 12% or more below 2005 levels. But they said more local action and a greater commitment to renewable energy by consumers' energy is needed. The city's quote-unquote greenhouse gas inventory is currently unknown. The student research bases its estimate of Kalamazoo greenhouse gas emissions on the Ann Arbor estimates, adjusting them proportionally to the population of each city. The proposed actions are divided into 6 categories: buildings, transportation, trees and gardens, local food, waste management, and engaged community. Creating more energy-efficient buildings would make the largest impact. The proposal suggests weatherizing low-income homes, strengthening the house code to improve energy efficiency in rentals, and developing a green business certification program. More ambitious goals include installing 1,000 solar water heaters and 500 solar power home energy systems, and making a commitment to power city-owned buildings entirely through green energy by 2025. One of my concerns, and I brought this up, they were actually presenting this at a Democratic Party meeting about a month ago. I'm hoping that, one, I think we need more of these green efficient homes, and as the costs are, as Naomi Klein discussed in her article, the costs of manufacturing the things like solar panels and wind generators is going down drastically at an exponential rate. So I'm thinking, or at least I'm hoping, we might be able to grow that target. It said 500 solar power homes. I'm hoping we can get to way, way more than that. In particular, it wasn't explicitly stated, but I really hope the resources are put on low-income areas. I've had a dream for several years, there should be some kind of investment in neighborhoods like where I grew up, or the neighborhoods on the north side. Give them the greenhouses, the solar and wind energy. Those are the people who most desperately could use that extra money that they'd be getting off their electric bill. I mean, like the houses in the Millwood or the Westnedge Hill neighborhood, they might be able to have more matching financial capital to make that happen. But the actual impact that it's going to have on people's lives in those low-income neighborhoods would be tremendous. People would be happier. They'd have more money to spend. You would probably, transitively, you'd see a reduction in crime because people wouldn't be so broke. So, yeah, I'm hoping that focus, that green infrastructure, gets focused in on the parts of our community that are truly in need. And I don't know if there's really enough of an emphasis on that, but I really hope there will be. Going on, said in the transportation sector, the proposal recommends improving public transportation and non-motorized modes of travel while supporting the use of electric and hydrogen-fueled vehicles. Kind of expanding on that, the article doesn't talk about this, but what they are talking about is expanding our busing system to be county-wide, and also increasing bus routes. And we already use buses that use electric motors and biofuels, which is good. But this is going to converge, I think, in a big way. Especially younger people are buying vehicles less. I myself don't own a car. I live down the Vine. I work downtown. So it's pretty easy for me to just walk, bus, or Uber where I need to go. And I think, that's largely where the direction is heading in the city. And I think if people have the option, if public transportation is made broader and more convenient, a lot more people are going to opt out of having gas-powered vehicles. Goes on to say, the plan also emphasizes action that supports trees and gardens. These play a role in reducing heat islands, improving air quality, absorbing stormwater, and beautifying the city. And yeah, it's great. You guys want to? We already got a lot of trees in this town, but we need. Let's add more. It's nice. It's pretty. Encouraging the consumption of locally grown food and reducing the amount of waste were also among the recommendations. And particularly, I was just mentioning the Vine neighborhood. We've got a food desert. There is talk of having an indoor year-round farmers market put into the place where the old Hardings was. And I would really, really support that. I also think that more of our local grocery stores need to play a more apt role in getting their food sourced from local areas. I'll admit I do most of my shopping at Aldi, and while they are a lot more green friendly than most chain stores, they don't have as much local produce as I'd like. I used to really like it that they had Michigan apples, and they haven't been coming from Michigan lately. So that'll help not only CO2, transportation of food won't be coming from all over the country, but it's healthier, and it will help our local farming community and expand our local farming community too. And Michigan's blessed. Our agricultural resources in the state allow us to grow a pretty diverse array of different crops. It's one of the reasons that we're projected to be kind of a climate haven in the next 100 years or so, because our soil is capable of growing a pretty broad variety of different fruits and vegetables. In the end, the students, and I'm going back to the article, in the end, the students noted that the actions throughout their plan will require changes in behavior by Kalamazoo residents. Many will only succeed with widespread community participation and support. WMU adopted a plan to reach climate neutrality by 2065, and Kalamazoo College set a similar goal to reduce greenhouse gases 25% by 2020. As of June 6th, mayors from 246 American cities have signed the pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency, create a clean energy economy, and build relationships to address climate change. 16 Michigan cities signed the letters, including Ann Arbor, Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Traverse City. So, yeah, we've got some good momentum going on here in town. I'm glad to see it, that, at least Kalamazoo is taking the climate issue seriously. But as I said, a lot of this is going to boil down to, when push comes to shove, people are going to have to change their habits, and people are going to have to get involved, and people are going to need to value sustaining our environment over convenience. I talked about increasing the bus system. There's going to be people who maybe the determination for them isn't even going to come down to money or saving money, but it's going to come down to convenience. I want to continue owning a gas-powered vehicle for convenience. I would argue, unless you absolutely need a vehicle to get to work, a gas-powered vehicle to get to work, really think about switching over to the bus. Really think about switching over to locally sourced food. Try to look into getting a wind generator, some solar panels on your house. And if you can't afford it now, keep your eye on it, because the prices keep going down and down and down. It's good to see that some degree of public pressure has worked with the Imagine Kalamazoo project. So for those of you who listen to my show consistently, I've had some critiques about the Excellence Foundation. That's that $75 million grant given us by two people. It raises some really alarming issues about government transparency and democratic control of the government. If you go back to a Medium article, why Kalamazoo residents are looking a $75 million gift horse in the mouth, it talks about how the inception of the foundation and the Imagine Kalamazoo program that came from it was really done a lot behind closed doors. Wasn't really developed or decided by the commission as much as it was just put in front of their face to rubber stamp. So it's good to see that public input is steering the Imagine Kalamazoo project, and that they are making these promises to devote some of those resources towards energy efficiency and climate issues. It's a good sign. Especially considering one of those donors is former Bill Parfait, one of the main donors to the Excellence Foundation, used to be one of the chairs of Rick Snyder's Political Action Committee. Yeah. Ooh. Well, I guess keep that in mind. We got to keep using public pressure to make sure that's money used for the right things, like our low-income neighborhoods and climate. And hey, there's an idea. Maybe use some of that money to give, solar panels and wind generators to those low-income neighborhoods. I don't know. That's supposed to be part of the program, is trying to end generational poverty. It's like, well, that's a good start, and you're killing several birds with one stone. They save money, and they save the environment at the same time. Yeah, I'll call up the Bills and tell them all about my idea. Hey, you billionaires, here's an idea to do all your money with it. Well, it'd take a lot more than me. It'd take public pressure, and a lot of the towns saying that. Just saying. So yeah, we've got a good start here in Kalamazoo, and I really hope that we continue to go down the right path with it. There's been some good signs on the county level. We just through a lot of intense public engagement, got the county commission to say no to Line 5, which is that pipeline they want to rebuild and start pumping oil through again in the Mackinac Straits, which is a very bad place to have an oil pipeline. But it does really seem like the political winds are blowing in the right direction here in Kalamazoo when it comes to climate stuff. But again, does it go nearly far enough? No, it really doesn't. We got to be more ambitious. We got to try to sell this in a way that will appeal to more people than just beyond environmental activists. That's why I was saying, like, we need to tie this into the generational poverty issue. Give poor people green jobs, give poor people access to green energy, and you're solving multiple problems, and you're using that money in a really effective way that's going to help stimulate the local economy and help improve the quality of life here in Kalamazoo. And it might just save the world, especially if a lot of other cities start doing the same thing. And hey, we'll need people to have some money and be successful, because like that other article said, we're going to be a climate sanctuary city in about 50 or 60 years. So, when all of the coastal cities start sinking into the ocean, they're going to be coming here to Kalamazoo. So we better have our ish together by the time they get here. I'm just saying. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of check in a little bit more on what Upton had to say with his statement, and I found this kind of funny. Upton said the agreement was carefully crafted and has many positives, including caveats to monitor countries with high pollution such as China and India. If they're on, there's no reason we shouldn't stay on, he said. For us to join the ranks of Syria and Nicaragua as being the only countries not to sign on, this, I think, is a mistake. Oh, man. For Upton to bring up Nicaragua is particularly ironic, because do y'all know why Nicaragua refused to sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement? Because they thought it wasn't ambitious enough. Their targets are like way more ambitious than the rest of the world. Why didn't Syria sign on? Well, I think that kind of speaks for itself. They're a little busy being in the middle of a cluster F of a war over there. So, they're not really in a position to make climate promises. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't believe it. We're just like Syria or Nicaragua. I wish we were more like Nicaragua. Wish Trump was like, I wish we had a president like, if Trump were as dumb as he is, but was for climate justice, that would be hilarious. He was like, this deal's terrible. It's a terrible deal. It's going to destroy the world. What's the deal with this? Say that on his tweets. Yeah. It's a very, very, very bad deal. We're all gonna die. What's good about this deal? I don't understand it. Okay. We are going to build a way better climate agreement than the French ever did. See, if only somebody had come up to Trump and be like, you think you want the French to be doing something better than you? He's like, no, I will have the best climate policy. It's going to be so big. Believe me. Yes. But no. Fortunately, the wrong people are whispering in his ear. People like Steve Bannon and Rex Tillerson and I don't know, maybe not Pence so much. I don't know if y'all noticed. He's kind of staying in the back. Occasionally he'll pop up. It's like, oh, see some Nazis stored on some headstones at the Jewish cemetery, so I'm out here with some gloves and a shovel fixing it up. Because I want to look good, because, whenever my boss gets impeached, I'll be next in line. Oof. And, yeah, there's something to think about. Stray thought, everybody who's for the impeachment of Trump, do realize he'll get replaced by a religious fanatic, right? I don't know. He scares me a lot more than Trump does. Trump's really good at galvanizing people, like the rest of the world, who are like, we have to take climate seriously. You got the centrist Macron that said we're going to make the planet great again, and they're talking about strengthening the agreement and actually turning it into a treaty. So yeah, again, thank you, Trump, for lighting a fire under the world's butt. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to switch up topics. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
This is These United States, which is a band playing for you our instruments backwards. Now we're going to speak with you briefly backwards for a moment while we play our instruments for you forwards. You're listening to WIDR
89.1 Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Radio forwards.
Support for Wider FM comes from Pedal Bicycles, now with 2 locations in downtown Kalamazoo and Portage. Pedal Bicycles has the right bike for every Kalamazoo rider, whether you're blazing the trails, cruising the streets, or just getting off the training wheels. To keep your ride running smooth, Pedal Bicycles offers multiple levels of repair services, anything from a quick tune-up to a complete overhaul. And to keep you safe and looking fly, Pedal Bicycles has all of the gear and apparel you'll need. To discover your spin within, head to 185 Romans Road in Portage, 611 West Michigan Avenue in downtown Kalamazoo, or pedalbicycle.com. Thanks, Pedal Bicycle, for supporting sustainable transportation, Buns of Steel, and Radio Evolution.
right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So I just had a caller call in, and sorry, I got a little caught up in the convo. Some interesting things brought up. We were talking about climate change. He said, perhaps Donald Trump is basically using the climate issue, pulling out of Paris, to up the value of Mar-a-Lago, because when he retires and Mar-a-Lago goes underwater, he can make money off of tourists who come down to see it. We also brought up a little bit talking about like political. What's the word? Political infighting, or as it were, political politeness. Just for those of you who don't tune in regularly. I try not to really go after, again, like the show is about taking on the establishment. Sometimes that establishment is Democrat, sometimes it's Republican. I try to be an equal opportunity caller out on forces that be. And I'll say I used to have more of a habit of having like my own politics lean more kind of like radical left, libertarian socialism, that word. But we used to have more like conservative, like free market guys on the show. I'd like to start doing that again soon. If any of you are out there listening, and maybe you've read a lot of Ayn Rand or something, and you want to come on and espouse your point of view, please hit up the show. We love having a diverse panel on, and I haven't had co-hosts on the program for a while now, so it would be nice. It would be nice to have people to bounce off of. I know all of you out there love hearing my angelic voice talk about the anti-establishment news, but perhaps it would be interesting to hear from more than just the Hoodrat himself. So, speaking of calling out both sides, and in fact, let's have a little bit of levity. This story could have been ripped out of the funny pages, but this is from the Florida Squeeze, which is a kind of leftist alternative media newspaper down in Florida. They're talking about our old dear friend Debbie Wasserman Shultz. If you don't, do you remember Debbie? Oh yeah, she was the woman who helped orchestrate all of the shenanigans in the Democratic primary last year, and kind of helped tilt the scales in the favor of Hillary Clinton. Well, if you don't know, there's been a little lawsuit going on involving that. So, these two lawyers are suing on behalf of people who supported Bernie's campaign. They're basically saying that the DNC committed fraud on them, that it's in their own bylaws that they're supposed to run their primaries in an impartial, even-handed manner. This is something that Debbie Wasserman Shultz would go on CNN and MSNBC and say over and over again, we're even-handed. I don't have a stake in who's going to win. And of course, the WikiLeaks revelations from DNC revealed that no, actually, she did have her finger on the scale, and they did have kind of a pre-selected candidate. I mean, there's emails going back as far as 2015, 2014, talking about Hillary as if she's already the nominee, talking about the DNC paving the road for her. And then, basically, a lot of emails talk very catty emails going back and forth, talking about Bernie like he's just some obstacle, talking about it was deliberate how they would put the debates, few debates late at night. There were questions that got leaked, basically emailed from Donna Brazile to Hillary's campaign. It was revealed that networks like CNN and MSNBC were actively working with the Clinton campaign to keep Bernie out, to give Hillary good coverage and to give Bernie as little coverage as possible. All of this is tied into their lawsuit. The DNC's lawyers have gone on to say some ridiculous stuff like that the idea that DNC does not have a legal obligation to hold a fair primary. And if they wanted to, they could just go. And this is literal. They said this. I'm not paraphrasing. They said they could go back to cigars and pick the candidate like they did in the old days. Why isn't that on the news, everybody? Gee, I wonder why. So this story is actually kind of bizarre and pretty funny, actually. So this article is called DNC Fraud Lawsuit, examining the bizarre phone call with Debbie Wasserman Shultz, District Office on Caller ID. This is by Brooke Hines. It was published on June 4th. The latest wrinkle in the still oddly underreported DNC fraud lawsuit is spooky, weird, and yet possibly also incredibly lame. Late last week, the law firm for the suit's plaintiffs filed a notice with the court that it had received an anonymous call from someone using an electronic voice disguising gadget, seeking information about the class action lawsuit alleging fraud against the DNC and its former chairperson, Debbie Wasserman Shultz. The bizarre caller was given nothing but publicly available information. But the kicker was that caller ID apparently matched that of Shultz's own district office in Aventura, Florida. Because of the possibility the call actually came from Shultz or someone in her office, attorneys for the plaintiff were ethically obligated to notify the court. Lawyers were bound by professional ethics to avoid direct contact with other parties represented by counsel. In the event of any accidental contact, such as individuals contacting opposing counsel by phone without their attorney, it's the responsibility of the lawyers receiving the contact to document it and give notice to demonstrate they were not deliberately engaging in improper communications. So the law firm of Beck & Lee dutifully advised the court and the attorneys defending the DNC of this possible unsolicited direct contact by your client, Debbie Wasserman Shultz. The DNC's attorneys responded by denying the call was made from Wasserman Schultz's office. They mentioned in their notice that the district office for Wasserman Schultz in Ventura was undergoing repairs, indicating that it's not in use at the time, but the number still came from there. Who would make such a peculiar call, and for what reason? Did it really come from Schultz's district office, or was the incoming phone number spoofed as the DNC's lawyers appear to be suggesting? Either way, what would be the purpose of such a bizarre stunt? We don't know the identity of the caller or the content of the call, except that they signed off with okie dokie. And it was a voice changer, so they speak in deep, just like, okie dokie, goodbye. Yeah. The caller might have inquired about something as mundane as a case number. On the other hand, they could have been trying to gain confidential information. Maybe the caller was hoping to trap the law firm in an ethical snare by getting it to willfully engage in unsolicited talk with a represented party. Or maybe the caller's aim was to ratchet up tension using a disguised voice like crazed killers do on television. Beck and Lee have been vocal on social media about their concerns regarding apparent threats made to other lawyers involved in the case. Perhaps this weird call was an admittedly childish attempt to rattle them. We just don't know. What we do know is this, is that Debbie Wasserman Shultz has a history of weird behavior in this case. She appeared to be trying to avoid service of process when the suit was first filed, conduct more associated with deadbeat dads and crooked car dealers than with public officials. Schultz also seemed curiously out of control in videos circulating regarding custody of her laptop, which was confiscated in an investigation of former members of her information technology team. One of the videos shows a red-faced Wasserman Schultz at a budgetary hearing threatening consequences to U.S. Capitol Police if a particular laptop isn't returned immediately. There's a similar video where Wasserman Schultz is oddly agitated about protocol regarding the use of Dropbox. The matter of the investigation and her IT team is an unfolding story unto itself. We'll save for another day. Schultz is not accused of having anything to do with the criminal conduct, but her overwrought behavior surrounding the disposition of the laptop is nothing short of bizarre. What kind of pressure is Schultz facing or feeling that's causing her to act out in this way? How might it be affecting her staff? Given the state of affairs, perhaps the simplest explanation for weird anonymous phone calls showing Debbie Wasserman Schultz's number on her caller ID is not what we might normally think. Some kid screwing around with call spoofing software and a voice disguising gadget for kids. Maybe Debbie or someone in her office has reached the end of their metaphorical rope and just got weird, desperate, or silly. The DNC's report that the Ventura office is closed for repairs doesn't really cut against this. What better place for a person to try a stunt like this than in a landline in a darkened office with no one around? So they're kind of speculating here, but I would not put it past these people like Debbie Wasserman Shultz, and this is a really funny mental image, like in a darkened office, just with a voice changer, is like, I'm calling about the DNC lawsuit. I want, have you put any charges against me? I mean, Debbie Wasserman Shultz. Okie dokie, goodbye. As we've seen in a lot of cases, the establishment is really stupid. They're so dumb. And if you need other evidence, like them being technologically impaired. So the Podesta emails, whether you think it was a Russian hacker or whatever, do you know how they actually got them from his phone? Did they use some incredible, sophisticated hacking software to do it? No, they fished him with like a dumb like Google ad. And it's like, your password's been compromised. Enter your password now, and so that we can fix it. John Podesta fell for that. Do you know what his password was too? His password was password. The establishment is dumb, or at least they're like as technologically impaired as like your average grandmother. So could it have been Debbie herself making this stupid phone call? No, we don't know that. But it is kind of funny to think about. And I really wouldn't put it past them. Or, one of her cohorts, I could just imagine that conversation. I want you to call them and threaten them in like a spooky voice. Use one of those voice changers. So, ma'am, that's really kind of a dumb idea. Just do it. I'm Debbie Wasserman Shultz. All right. All right. So, if you want to read a little bit more about that, that's at the Florida Squeeze, DNC Fraud lawsuit examining the bizarre phone call with Debbie Wasserman Shultz, District Office on Caller ID. So, that was kind of a bit of a funner story, at least more fun than some of the stuff we usually deal with. Hopefully we'll see how that goes. Hopefully the DNC fraud lawsuit lawyers don't get any more intimidating phone calls from Darth Vader or Bane. Oh yes, you think you fight with election fraud? I was born in it. So let's pivot a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the news sources I go to a lot is Mint Press News, and they had an article about Flint that really touched me. I wanted to read from it if I got a chance to, and we've got some time on the show, so this is Mint Press News. Flint residents struggle to have voices heard as crisis continues and media moves on. This is by Rokoya Shamsuddin. This is published yesterday, June 6th. For nearly 3 years, the residents of Flint, Michigan, a city located just 70 miles north of Detroit, has had contaminated water running through their pipes, poisoned by lead and other dangerous metals. The crisis began when local authorities decided to switch the city's main water source in April 2014. And so we already know this. At least I hope most of the people reading or listening to the show know about this. Those are the basic cliff notes. City needs clean water. Emergency manager wants to save some money. Emergency manager decides, they don't need clean water. People start getting sick from lead poisoning. Oh my gosh, it's a national scandal. And they still don't have clean water there, and people aren't paying as much attention to it as they used to. So it goes on to talk about some of the people still working in Flint to stop this. There are many community organizers in Flint who are working to raise awareness of the issue and resist the local government's attempts to deflect blame. But Flint resident Melissa Mays has stood up as a powerhouse in the movement against water contamination. Mays is a mother of 3 who founded Water You Fighting For, a grassroots organization dedicated to spreading awareness of the Flint water crisis. Mays and her family represent the many people who have had their health impacted by the crisis. Lead poisoning has significant long-term health consequences, particularly for children, whose growing bodies are highly susceptible to both absorbing and retaining the potent neurotoxin. Compromised immune systems, brain damage, and memory loss are just a few of the symptoms that the poisoning has caused and will continue to cause for years to come. Mays explained to Mint Press News that Flint residents feel completely abandoned by the media, as news outlets have largely stopped covering the story. It seems the residents of Flint are being forgotten, ignored, and dismissed all over again, Mays lamented. As media coverage has dissipated, Flint residents are having their water services terminated. Other households are being threatened with eviction and credit penalties for refusing to pay their water bills, even though the water they're being charged for isn't possibly safe to use. And yes, that's true. That's a thing that's been going on. Eviction, because they don't pay water bills for water that is not safe to drink. This represents yet another slight against a community that has been marginalized by racial discrimination for years, as well as struggled with poverty. Mays is one of over 8,000 residents who are receiving letters from the city demanding that they pay for the unsafe water. I received a letter stating that if I didn't pay $891 of the $2,570 water bill in less than 3 weeks, they would send a notice off to have a tax lien put on my house. There was no notice ahead of time, and when I called, there was no way out of it, Mays said. Despite the tremendous hurdles in their way, including a local administration that had to be ordered by a judge to deliver clean bottled water to residents, the people of Flint have remained determined in their fight for clean water. Their tragedy has pulled the curtain away from an even larger, albeit hidden water crisis that spans the country. After Flint officials were exposed, similar cases began to pop up around the nation. These cases include that These cases indicate that Flint was no anomaly, and that there may be, in fact, be a conspiracy of greed behind the country's toxic water. According to a report from CNN, at least 5,300 U.S. water systems are in violation of the U.S. EPA's lead and copper rule. But the EPA has been allowing water agencies to game the system by overlooking practices that allow authorities to use compromised water testing results. Such practices include only testing homes where finding lead would be highly unlikely, or taking water samples at a slower rate, thereby lowering the possibility of finding harmful metals in the water. According to Robert Doyle Bullard, former dean of the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs, environmental injustice has undeniable elements of racism, anti-poor sentiment that allow it to continue. After reviewing 80 years of disaster responses from state officials for his book, The Wrong Complexion for Protection, How the Government Responds to Disaster Endangers African American Communities, Bullard found that the government is slower to respond to disasters when people of color are involved. This is exactly what advocates have been saying about Flint, where 57% of the population is black and 41.5% lives in poverty. While much has been said about who has worked to save Flint, including the publication of stories where 38-year-old Dr. Hannah Atisha is described as having single-handedly rescued the city's residents, Mays wants people to see the story differently. This was not a story where a PhD and a doctor saved Flint. They validated what residents had already tested for and found months before we brought in outside experts, Mays said. While unmistakably appreciative of what doctors and other figures have done for locals, Mays argues that the residents themselves are being treated like secondary characters in their own story. Residents have brought in the amazing attorneys and experts because we knew something was wrong with our water, just like we know that pathogens exist now and have been in our water since the switch. Too many people are getting sick, and around 200 people have died in 3 years since the switch, Mays said. Even now, people who residents previously trusted, are outright dismissing the burgeoning cases of rashes, hair loss, bacterial infections, and other illnesses in Flint, just like the state of Michigan did at the start of the city's nightmarish ordeal. Still, what we want people to know is that Flint is tough. We don't want a handout. We have been betrayed repeatedly, poisoned, and left for dead. But we have not let that stop us from standing up and fighting back. And not just for us, but the whole country, Mays said. Flint residents have been joined by allies from around the nation, including Standing Rock water defenders and organizers who see the two crises as being linked. Kyle T. Mays explains in the Journal of Cultural Anthropology that Flint presents alternative narratives, even renewed possibilities of solidarity between black and indigenous people, acknowledging differences and commonalities. May not only sees those commonalities, but has been energized by the prospect of being able to turn the ever-growing movement in Flint into a national effort to protect that most crucial and vital of resources, water. We are not going to stop until we see justice for Flint, but we hope to be a good example for all other cities fighting the same uphill battle. It's not easy, but Flint lives matter. We all do, and we just have to fight to prove it, Mays said. So to speak a little bit more, I talked about this a little bit on the show. There's actually a camp out in Flint right now, the Promise Camp. I actually have some friends out there right now. Chelsea Lyons has been reporting there for Truth Against the Machine, which is kind of a outgrowth from the Young Turks' Jordan Sheraton. We're seeing a lot of solidarity between, again, like the Standing Rock folks, a lot of whom are at Camp Promise right now, and the issue involving water, because in both of those cases, it was a maligned group. It was a maligned ethnic group who has faced a history of discrimination and abandonment in this country. You know, we talk about toxic water. There are reservations in the American Southwest where access to water is a hardship for Native folks, where their water is contaminated. And why? Why are these things not fixed? Why is that infrastructure not built? Why are these people left to be drinking poison? Well, across the tracks in Flint, Michigan, get to the suburbs, and you'll notice they don't have any problems with their water. No suburbs are predominantly affluent, predominantly white. Environmental racism is real. I've seen it in my own state. I've seen it in the front lines at Standing Rock. People of color and the indigenous folks in this country are thrown under the bus constantly. If they're not being used as guinea pigs, if they're not being used as scapegoats, then they're being ignored when they need the most basic of human rights, access to clean water. And, you know, we're talking about climate change earlier. All of these issues interlink. And, you know, for all the white environmental activists out there, you know, I think I'm starting to see it more often, that, like, that is how it's framed. I'm going to the People Summit this weekend, and there's going to be a plenary there about climate justice that falls around predominantly environmental racism. But that's what it needs to keep boiling down to. It's not about save the whales or save the planet. It's like, save us, save the humans, save the black and brown peoples who are going to be put on the front lines when our climate starts to unwind itself, who are put on the front lines when our infrastructure crumbles, put on the front line when we need to build more infrastructure to perpetuate climate change and risk clean water. And in Flint, it still goes on. And in Standing Rock, the Dakota Access Pipeline just got turned on. And is already leaked. All of our lives are going to matter very soon, ladies and gentlemen. And we got to protect our people. That's how we got to start. That's how this movement needs to begin. We need to protect the people being victimized by this system. Eventually, it's going to be all of us. It's going to be every man, woman, child on earth. If we don't start fighting for our people now, we are not going to have the solidarity we need to fix this issue. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We're going to take a quick little break. Remember, it's your only source for the real truth underneath the BS. We dig it up every week. We talk about it. Pierce through the establishment's propaganda. Keep your dial locked. We got more of the Hoodrat Strategist program on the way.
Alvan Humane Society is a non-for-profit, no-kill animal shelter that has been serving Allegan, Van Buren, and surrounding areas for almost 50 years. They are hosting their Cares Fund Drive and are over halfway to their $500,000 goal. Alvan can currently house around 30 dogs and 100 cats. Money raised from the Cares campaign will go to build a new shelter, which will expand this capacity by 20%. Alvan Humane Society has 20 dogs and 40 cats that are microchipped, spayed and neutered, and fully vaccinated, ready for adoption right now. To adopt a pet, donate to the Cares Fund Drive, or find out more, feel free to visit them on the web at www.al-van.org.
This is an open slot in the wider clock and could be filled with an underwriting announcement for your local Kalamazoo business. For more information, please visit widerfm.org and head to the support page.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So, I'm going to talk about Russiagate, of all things. Oh, wow. And, those of you tuning in the program pretty regularly, I've been very skeptical since the beginning. My complaints, not even so much linked to like whether or not Russia did it, but just the way the whole narrative is being used. Something I pointed out time and time again is like the American people haven't seen any actual evidence. Those agencies and media that are most confident in the validity of that narrative have engaged in repeated errors, falsehoods. Washington Post did that news story about the Vermont electrical grid being taken down by Russian hackers. That was absolutely not true. They did end up redacting it, but not without a statement. So, for all intents and purposes, that article was true for anybody who read it that day. And also, mention Washington Post in particular. They have a $600 million contract with the CIA. Y'all know that? Yeah. Not to mention, most mainstream media. Their coverage is really dictated by a congealment of corporate interests, monopolies. That is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Right? Most of our media is owned by like a handful of people. So if there is a let's call it like kind of like the neoliberal versus neoconservative agenda. If there's like a neoliberal agenda, there is a contingent of the mass media that is going to be pushing that, and then represented by like MSNBC, the Washington Post, etc. And then there's one that's kind of like pushed back against it slightly, although Fox News is kind of like fallen in line with this. They say there is something to it, and I bring it up because there was an article in The Intercept about it. And this is actually the first time I've seen allegations of Russian hacking appear from a source that I actually respect and take seriously. As like my, the anti-establishment dude that I am. And I wanted to talk about it because this is a good way to write an article. And I wanted to point out some things that I really liked about it and to talk a little bit about the content of it, of course. This is from The Intercept, June 5th. Top secret NSA report details Russian hacking effort days before 2016 election. What it says at the start, Russian military intelligence executed a cyber attack on at least one U.S. voting software supplier and sent spear phishing emails to more than 100 local election officials just days before last November's presidential election, according to a highly classified intelligence report obtained by The Intercept. The top secret NSA document, which was provided anonymously to The Intercept and independently authenticated, analyzes intelligence very recently required by the agency about a month-long Russian intelligence cyber effort against elements of the U.S. election and voting infrastructure. The report, dated May 5th, 2017, is the most detailed U.S. government account of Russian interference in the election that has yet come to light. While the document provides a rare window into the NSA's understanding of the mechanics of Russian hacking, it does not show the underlying raw intelligence on which the analysis is based. A U.S. intelligence officer who declined to be identified cautioned against drawing too big a conclusion from the document because a single analysis is not necessarily definitive. Oh my goodness. For the Rachel Maddows of the world, that's how you do journalism. If you do not have the actual proof, you give a caveat. Now, this is big. They got a leaked NSA document that speaks to actual Russian hacking, but they are responsible enough journalists to say, caution reader, please do not extrapolate too much from this, and please understand that this is not necessarily proven. This is a report, but we do not have the actual data that proves the legitimate claims proves the claims of the report. And other outlets are running with this article from The Intercept, by the way, and they're saying this is the smoking gun. This is the thing that proves there's Russian interference, which, I'm glad that, all of these people who usually crap on The Intercept are now using it as like a rubric of legitimacy, because it is. But again, I like that The Intercept is doing a lot more due diligence than the people who are actually covering the story that The Intercept dropped. So The report indicates that Russian hacking may have penetrated further in the U.S. voting systems than previously understood. It states unequivocally in the summer statement that it was Russian military intelligence, specifically the Russian General Staff Main Intelligence Directorate, or GRU, that conducted the cyber attacks described in the document. The document itself says they executed cyber espionage operations against a named U.S. company in August 2016, evidently to obtain information on elections-related software and hardware solutions. The actors likely used data obtained from that operation to launch a voter registration-themed spear phishing campaign targeting U.S. local government organizations. The NSA analysis does not draw conclusions about whether the interference had any effect on the election's outcome and concedes that much remains unknown about the extent of the hackers' accomplishments. However, the report raises the possibility that Russian hacking may have breached at least some elements of the voting system, with disconcertingly uncertain results. The review did not attempt to assess what effect the Russian efforts had on the election, despite the fact that Russian intelligence obtained and maintained access to elements of multiple U.S. state or local election boards. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the assessment reported reassuringly, the types of systems we observed Russian actors targeting or compromising are not involved in vote tallying. So there is that. The NSA has learned, however, that Russian government hackers, part of a team with a cyber espionage mandate specifically directed at U.S. and foreign elections, focused on parts of the system directly connected to the voter registration process, including a private sector manufacturer of devices that maintain and verify the voter rolls. And this talks about the spear phishing attack. They posed as an e-voting vendor, and they tricked local government employees into opening Microsoft Word documents invisibly tainted with potent malware that could give hackers full control over the infected computers. So on August 24, 2016, the Russian hackers sent spoofed emails purporting to be from Google to employees of the unnamed U.S. election software company, according to the NSA report. And yeah, see, this kind of just back some of the Podesta thing. They actually did it. It's not that hard, apparently, to trick our elected officials. Although the document does not directly identify the company in question, it contains references to a product made by VR Systems, a Florida-based vendor of electronic voting services and equipment whose products are used in 8 states. The spear phishing email contained a link directing the employees to a malicious faux Google website that would request their login credentials and then hand them over to the hackers. The NSA identified 7 potential victims at the company. While malicious emails targeting 3 of the potential victims were rejected by an email server, at least one of the employee accounts was likely compromised, the agency concluded. The NSA notes in its report that it is unknown whether the aforementioned spear phishing deployment successfully compromised all the intended victims and what potential data from the victim could have been exfiltrated. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. This is a very long article, and it does describe, what the actual report talks about in more detail. VR Systems, that's the company that was allegedly targeted by the Russian intelligence agency. According to its website, VR Systems had contracts in 8 states: California, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, New York, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. And Pamela Smith, president of election integrity watchdog Verified Voting, agreed that even if VR Systems doesn't facilitate the actual casting of votes, it could make an alluring target for anyone hoping to disrupt it. If anyone has access to a state voter database, they can take malicious action by modifying or removing information, she said. This would affect whether someone has the ability to cast a regular ballot or be required to cast a provisional ballot, which would mean that would have to be checked for the eligibility before it is included in the vote. And it may mean the voter has to jump through certain hoops, such as providing their information to the election official before the eligibility is affirmed. Something similar happened in the California primary to a lot of Bernie Sanders voters last year. Just kind of a stray thought. Scrolling down, talked to Alex Halderman, director of the University of Michigan Center for Computer Security and Society. He goes on to say, usually at the county level, there's going to be some company that does the pre-election programming of the voting machines, Halderman told The Intercept. I would worry about whether an attacker who could compromise the poll book vendor might be able to use software updates that the vendor distributes to also infect the election management system that programs the voting machines themselves. Once you do that, you can cause the voting machine to create fraudulent counts. So it goes on to kind of detail, so what is the actual effect of this alleged activity by the Russian intelligence agency? Using this method to target a U.S. presidential election, the Russian approach faces a challenge in the decentralized federal election system, where processes differ not merely state to state, but often county to county. And meanwhile, the Electoral College makes it difficult to predict where efforts should be concentrated. Hacking an election is hard, not because of technology, that's surprisingly easy, but it's hard to know where it's going to be effective, said Schneier. If you look at the last few elections, 2000 was decided in Florida, 2004 in Ohio, and the most recent election in the couple counties in Michigan and Pennsylvania. So deciding exactly where to hack is really hard to know. And, that is interesting to point out that all of the states mentioned that these hacking attempts were made were not in any of the states that really decided the election. Again, I'll say that list again. California, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, New York, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. None of those states were particularly close. They were either in the tank for Hillary or Trump. And all of the deciding states actually owed Trump's victory to the cross-check voter suppression system. And I'm actually going to be playing a clip from investigative reporter Greg Palast about that. So, still a lot of questions. And I really want to thank... I'm thankful that The Intercept did their due diligence and tried to really explain, this is significant that we got this leak, but do not, proof up the implications of this, which the rest of the media already is doing. For my part, I think it's good to see there's some actual tangible evidence of this. A lot of people are wondering if this is just kind of the deep state shuffling some chess pieces around, trying to. There's a Zero Hedge article that makes a few assertions about. One, the leaker is kind of suspiciously anti-Trump, and that it's a little convenient that it kind of pulls people away from the Russians hack the DNC to the Russians hack the actual election machines. But I'm here on the side of this sounds legitimate enough. Granted, it doesn't really sound that much more drastic than, China hacks us all the time. We hack China all the time. Russia hacks China. Russia hacks us. We hack Russia. This is on par with a lot of the kind of cyber espionage that large countries are doing against each other all the time. So is it that dramatic, especially when you compare it to a lot of the other factors that decided the election? Honestly, no. I mean, that's the biggest surprising takeaway from this leak is if you actually look at it and you take it at face value, if it's true, it still didn't really impact our election all that much. Certainly not to the extent that Republican voter suppression, gerrymandering, Hillary Clinton's poor campaign, and other factors like that did. And I want to, again, illuminate people. The single biggest thing that the election on election day numerically was that cross-check system. And that was developed by Republican lawmakers, not Russia. And, I want people, because, the mainstream media, they are puffing up Russia again and again. They are beating, and over the next coming days, when Comey's going to talk, that's all they're going to be talking about. Who's talking about cross-check? Who's talking about how thousands and thousands of African-American, Latino voters were thrown off the voter rolls? Who's talking about them? Who's talking about their voice? Democrats certainly aren't. Any politicians run away from election integrity issues like it's a ghost. Nobody talks about it. Not Bernie, not John Kerry, not Hillary Clinton, not Al Gore. They do not talk about it. It's like Fight Club. The only rule of being part of the U.S. government is you do not talk about election integrity. All right, so U.S. government won't. Here's my main man, Greg Palast. He's going to tell you what was going down in the election. This is from a piece he did on Democracy Now!
Votes, but it's Ohio that decides who's going to be the president and who controls the Senate of the United States. There are those on both sides who say the vote can be hacked.
The revelation comes as investigators are confident Russia is behind several recent cyber attacks to influence the U.S. elections.
In Ohio in 2004, the mismatch of exit polls and the machine count that put George
Goodman as the United States.
So that people like this.
Up and down 3 floors and out into...
Yes. Same thing for the audit law. Every single one cast.
Sorry about that, folks.
Fraud if somebody tampered.
Clicked the wrong button.
All of America votes. Senate of the United States. There are those on both sides who say the vote can be hacked.
The revelation comes as investigators are confident Russia is behind several recent cyber attacks to influence the U.S. elections.
In Ohio in 2004, the mismatch of exit polls and the machine count that put George W. Bush back in the White House raised questions of the integrity of Ohio's voting machines. They had no paper ballots to allow an audit of the vote. But today, many new voting machines in Ohio have a built-in safety feature.
Well, machines now can actually take a ballot image in the sequence of every single one cast to eliminate fraud if somebody tampers with the paper ballots.
There's only one problem.
They've decided to turn off the security.
Election law attorney Robert Strategist represents Republicans and Democrats. He just discovered that the photo image and audit protection functions have literally been shut off.
So they bought state-of-the-art equipment and turned off the security.
We followed Strategist into state court in Columbus. He's seeking to order the Republican Secretary of State to turn on all the voter protections on the machines. We weren't allowed to film, but Republican officials argued that it would require a massive effort to turn on the protection applications.
It's a drop-down box, just like on your computer. Do you want ballot images of every ballot cast? You would think, yes. Same thing for the audit log.
The judge, a Republican appointee, disagreed. He ruled that the Republican officials could leave the machines unprotected. On Sunday, I was at the Freedom Faith Missionary Baptist Church. They're building their spirits to prepare to join other black churches from all over Ohio for Souls to the Polls Sunday voting. So they went to the one voting station for all of Dayton and waited in line to vote. And waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. 70% of the state's African Americans vote early. The line snaked up and down 3 floors and out into the parking lot.
I had a friend, she just texted me, and she said that she was going home because she worked the 3rd shift and she couldn't stand in the long lines.
Why? Because Republican Secretary of State John Husted said all counties can have only one single voting station on Souls to the Polls Day.
She wanted to vote today.
So they just make it, do you think that it's deliberate to make it harder for the day for African American voters?
Yeah, in other minorities, yeah. Yes, I do.
Indeed, Houston wanted to end Souls to the Polls Sunday voting entirely, but he was blocked by local officials. This is former Montgomery Elections Board member David Lieberman.
And we had voted, both the Republicans and Democrats, for long hours on weekends so that people like this could come and vote. After we did that, we were told by the Secretary of State that if we didn't change our vote, that he would fire us.
And so what happened?
I got fired. If you want to eliminate that early voting, then yeah, the effect is a racial effect.
And finally, we've uncovered a bigger threat than long lines or compromised machines. It comes out of the GOP's and Donald Trump's claim of voter fraud.
This voting system is out of control. You have people, in my opinion, that are voting many, many times.
Say what, Donald?
You have people, in my opinion, that are voting many, many times.
Reflecting Trump's claim of multiple voting Democrats, GOP-controlled states have purged nearly 1 million voters accused of voting or registering in 2 states. Ohio's Republican Secretary of State has a secret list of a whopping 497,000 double voting suspects. We got our hands on this confidential list, including such would-be criminal voters as Donald Alexander Webster Jr., who supposedly voted a second time in Virginia as Donald Eugene Webster Sr. We met with the would-be double voter.
Donald Eugene Webster. That's not my middle name.
Eugene is not your middle name?
No.
You ever use the name Eugene?
No.
They say you do.
Mm-mm.
You know that it's a crime if you vote more than once?
Of course. It never occurred to me to do that. You know, what's 2 votes going to do when you got thousands and thousands and thousands? You got to have a bunch of people doing that.
Well, do you? Are you part of a large conspiracy?
No, I'm not, sir.
In fact, nearly 2 million voters on the list, called Crosscheck, have middle names that don't match. Like this one, Maria Isabel Hernandez, is supposed to be the same voter as Maria Cristina Hernandez. Who's on the list? Names like Hernandez, Wong, Garcia, Jackson. Our experts have calculated that fully 1 in 6 voters of color are on the Republican blacklist. We've asked voting rights attorney Strategist why Ohio's Republicans would use this cross-check scheme.
He knows what he's doing is illegal. What he's doing is counting on bigotry to get away with it. He's picking first and last names only because he doesn't want to actually match people by using the middle name. He wants to purge blacks and Hispanics, and he's trying to make Ohio winnable in the only way he knows how, by stealing American citizens' votes.
In North Carolina, we spoke to the man who brought Crosscheck to the South, Colonel Jay Delancey of the Voter Integrity Project.
Interstate Crosscheck. Okay, these are the states.
When confronted with evidence of Crosscheck's racial bias, he chuckled.
And you would think that Jim Crow rose from the dead.
It's a brand new Jim Crow. Today, on Election Day, they're not going to use white sheets to keep away black voters. Today, they're using spreadsheets. Won't you please come to From Ohio, this is Greg Palast reporting for Democracy Now!
And Greg Palast joins us now from Columbus, Ohio. Greg, thanks so much for that report. Rolling Stone investigative reporter.
Thank you very much. That was his report from Democracy Now! And give you a little bit more information. So that cross-check system that they just described, that removed 450,000 voters in Michigan. 450,000. Mostly African American, mostly people of color. And what was Trump's margin of victory in the state? Well below that. Cross-check is why Trump won Michigan. And that is why he is president today. not Russia, that. Because Russia, maybe they threw out a few articles about John Podesta getting pizza, or it's allegedly. There's been no direct proof that a lot of that so-called fake news came out of Russia. There's a lot of there's fake news writers from all over the world that do this stuff just to make money and troll. So, and this alleged election tampering that it just surfaced from the Intercept article would have had a tiny, tiny footprint compared to this. Why is Donald Trump president? America's election integrity. Vladimir Putin didn't cause that. Russian government didn't cause that. That was our government. And by extension, that was us, because we fell asleep at the wheel while the plutocrats in D.C. started dismantling our democracy. I want to thank y'all. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR. Join us every week. I will be attending the People's Summit this weekend. I will be having a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm hoping to interview as many people as I can. We're also working on, I'm hoping to put together a special about the 2016 primary in time for the anniversary of the DNC. Also, I want to let y'all know, shout out to all those on the county commission. June is now officially Pride Month. Peace be, and much love for all of my LGBTQ brothers, sisters, and folks. And Pride Fest is going to be going down this weekend at Arcadia Park, June 9th, June 10th. So come out and celebrate if you got the time. Anyway, thank y'all for listening to the program, and keep on fighting for that revolution solution.